Well, here we are again. It's Monday morning. I thought I'd throw a little 30-minute video together here for you. I hope you're enjoying these things because I really enjoy doing them. And Lord willing, I'm going to do a lot more of them. But what I want to talk about today is how I had a website I operated for a while, and I kind of got out of that because it's a lot of trouble to keep a website updated and this kind of thing. So I just figured, well, I would just go with my YouTube channel. But when I had the website, I had a lot of people emailing me with their trouble. I had actually a place on that page where you could email me to ask me about car problems, and I would get these people that would email me and say, I went to this shop and they charged me $800 and that wasn't fixed, and I went to that, the problem wasn't fixed. I went to the other shop and they charged me another $800 and it wasn't fixed, or they charged me $300 or $500 or whatever. And I was always had the idea that if the first shop didn't satisfy you, you needed to go back to that same shop and see if they would make it right. A lot of the time I think they felt like they were going to go to another shop and somebody was going to know what is a silver bullet, and maybe they would get it fixed for $10 and they'd never go back to the first shop again. Well, some repairs were expensive. Even when we did them through the college, some of them were really expensive and people were surprised about how much they cost. But parts are expensive. We didn't charge labor there at the school, but there was a parts plus 20% thing, and so some of the parts could be pretty high. Anyway, there's nothing more frustrating to a customer than going to a place to get a problem fixed, and they trust the person that's doing the work. The problem's not fixed, and the person that's not, that did the work is not interested in some cases of making it right. Most shops that I know about are pretty good about treating people right, though. But yeah, I used to hear horror stories, and there was one of them there. Well, this one help desk story was about a 2000 Lincoln LS V8. He said every time he backed up and started forward, there was a slipping of the tires like the snow on gravel. So the snow or on gravel. The message appears to check traction control. His traction control light was coming on whenever he would back up and go forward. The radio would go off. The windows wouldn't work. Now, that was his spelling. I just put it just like he did. It won't work. I can have it jumped off and it'll be fine till the next time the scenario happens. Can I turn the traction control off, or will this cause any damage? Was the traction control what was causing his problem? Now, I happen to have known of a few of these Lincolns giving screwball problems like this, and if any of you guys have seen this, you're already going to know what I was going to tell the guy. But what I told him was the traction control wasn't causing that. In all likelihood, he had one bad ignition coil. One cop coil can cause all kinds of crazy problems all over the car that comes and goes, and because of RFI, radio frequency interference. And so he followed up and he says, you're the best. I've replaced 2 ignition coils. My mechanic told me I need to replace the other soon. He wasn't able to detect the problem with this. I can't wait to tell him. I bet this has been a problem all along. Now, that was not really such a terrific follow-up. I never heard from him again, but I felt like that's probably what his trouble with, because those Lincolns were dreadful for that, and some of the other Ford products will do that too. All right, help desk story 2. Got a 98 Dodge Grand Caravan, bought it just about a month ago, and it's got over 100,000 miles on it. It was running fine for about 2 weeks. The transmission leaked the red oil. So the garage brought the car to, repaired the transmission. So he had to have his transmission worked on because the oil leaked out of it. I guess they were fixing whatever with the leak. He didn't tell me what the leak was, but for the purposes of making the presentation not quite so dull, I put a leak in transmission pan here. I don't know what his leak was. All right, so if I put the gear in reverse, sometimes it doesn't catch. This happened, it seems like, not long after he got the car back. And when he was driving, sometimes the gear would go to neutral and the car doesn't go forward. I had to stop and put the car in place. I don't know what that means exactly, but sometimes it just takes a while before it catches. So on reverse, he had to put the car in drive and then back to reverse before it would work. He's wanting to know. So what comes to mind? What do you think is this? Anybody that does any transmission work has probably run into something like this at some point, and some of you probably already know what's going on. All right. He said, I'll take my car back to the garage. I hope you don't mind explaining to me what the possible problems are, so on and so forth. All right. I said, that sounds like the transmission's low on fluid. Whenever you're driving a car and you go around a curve and the transmission drops into neutral, chances are the transmission fluid's splashing. And you'd be surprised how many cars there are driving out there with dipsticks that are the wrong length in the transmission or even in the engine oil. And I'm not exactly sure I know how that happens, unless somebody lost the dipstick, forgot to put it back when they were filling one up with fluid one time, and then they put another dipstick back in there they thought be aight, and sometimes you run into issues like that. But I said, let me know what happens. Have somebody check the transmission fluid, make sure it's full of fluid before you do anything else. My idea is always to do what's cheap and easy first. I preach that a lot on here. Okay? So he said, I took the car back to the garage and they kept it a half a day and told me that it would cost over $500 to fix the problem. Alright? That's an interesting development, isn't it? Told them I'll think about it, took the car to another place, told them to check the transmission fluid. They said it's low and they filled it up and I hadn't had the problem anymore. Well, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? The first shop didn't check the transmission fluid. I don't know exactly what was going on there. I don't know where this shop was. I don't know who the mechanic was that worked on it. So I don't really have an axe to grind against anybody. These come from all over the country. Alright, says the guys at the garage were talking about taking the whole transmission down, but you pinpointed the problem, you know, whatever, you're a lifesaver. Alright, help desk story 3. I've got a 94 Ford Ranger, and it's got a 3-liter FE, whatever that means. A while ago it was running rough and took to a shop and they replaced the number 2 injector. It fixed the problem of running rough, however since then it has had a problem starting. Now that's kind of interesting, isn't it? If it wasn't doing this before. Now sometimes, even though it wasn't doing it before, it doesn't mean that what you did caused it, although sometimes it does. You know what I mean? And in that case, you just typically like to give the customer the benefit of the doubt. Okay. In the morning, it'll start right up. When I drive for a while, if I turn it off, it'll start right up again, no problem. But if I let it sit for about an hour to 5 hours, I have to crank it a couple of times to get it to start. When it starts, it runs rough for a couple of seconds, and sometimes you can smell gas like it's flooded. That's an interesting piece of information. Now, I will tell you this, fixing stuff long distance or over the phone is a drag. It's difficult to do sometimes, and you really want to go to help somebody. I got a call one time from Africa when I was working at the Ford dealer. Then we also had Jeep and stuff. And these Italian mechanics had run out of ideas on this Jeep Cherokee, and I managed to talk them to a solution on that vehicle to get it started, and that just blew me away. I mean, it was a scratchy phone call. It sounded like it was coming from the other side of the planet. And how they knew to call me at the Ford dealer in Alabama, I don't know. But anyway, so he said, took it back to the same mechanic. He replaced the fuel pressure regulator, the fuel pump relay, the EEC relay, checked and reset timing to no avail. He says he has no idea. Now that's pretty scary when you're taking it to somebody who's supposed to be working on your car and they keep working on it and they say, I don't have any idea what's wrong. That's spooky, isn't it? Couldn't put yourself in the customer's place, right? Okay, so I says, get it to the point of where it'll exhibit the symptom. Whenever I've done anything like this, what I would do is I would start it up, and while it was still running crappy right after it started, I'd switch it off. Don't let it smooth out. Switch it off. Pull all the plugs out. You know, you're going to find one that's soaking wet with fuel. This is now when it's running normal after it finally clears up. Find one that's soaking wet with fuel or sooty. That particular injector is going to be the one that's dripping. Now the other end of that is one dripping injector when the engine is hot can fill the entire manifold up with enough steam that can condense and wet all the plugs briefly when you're first trying to start it. And one dripping injector can cause a hard start. First time I ever saw that was on a Thunderbird that had 3 dripping injectors, and it'd spin about 45 seconds before it would fire up. And you know, usually breathe on one of them, they fire right up. Anyway, I says, when you pull the injectors out after you find a sooty spark plug, one of the injectors is going to be clean on the tip. If the injector is not leaking, it's going to have carbon and black crud on the tip. But if it's clean as a whistle, it's leaking, and that gas is keeping that, dissolve that carbon off there. And so that particular injector will be your leaker. If you replace that one injector, then you'll have it done. I've fixed all, Fords and Jeeps and other kind of vehicles like this the same way. And so I said the non-leaking injector have dirty tips. Another thing you can do, if it's not a fuel injector and it's not a hard start, but it skips when you first start it until it smooths out, particularly if you're losing a little bit of coolant, if you do that and switch it off while it's still skipping, and you pull the plugs out and you see steam rolling off one of the plugs, you got water making its way into that, you know, or coolant making its way into that cylinder. And that's another technique I've used. All right, here's a follow-up. Thanks, works great now, Tom. That's not really any information. I guess he felt like he needed to tell me that everything was okay, but I don't know what happened. He didn't give me any data here, so. All right. In this consumer-driven world, folks tend to take their business elsewhere if they don't like the merchandise or the service. That's just the way it is. Most people don't mind paying the bill if the vehicle is fixed when they drive away. But if they pay a big bill and they drive away and they still got the same problem, they tend to get pretty hot about that. Okay. All right. Rather than giving the first shop a chance to straighten things out, they try another shop, and I'm always saying, why did you go to a different shop? Because when you go to a different shop, it turns into a he said, she said, and we didn't do that, and nobody winds up responsible, and the customer's holding a bag, right? Some of them tell me they've gone back to the first shop, be told more money needs to be spent, and that kind of thing's frustrating. Who would lose confidence in a shop like that? But from a shop owner, technician's perspective, sometimes it seems like the deck is stacked against us. One time I was working on a vehicle that was the dealer transfer vehicle. It was a 92 Ford Taurus that had 325,000 miles on it. Still ran like a sewing machine. But other parts of the car tended to wear out. And this old guy that drove that vehicle for the dealer transfers, he actually brought the car in there for some wiper blades. And I went out there, got the wiper blades from the parts room, went there and popped them on there. The vehicle belonged to the dealership. But this guy was one of those people that no matter what happened, he always felt like it was your fault. And so after I put the wiper blades on it, he came back and said, that wiper, those wipers are making noise, or that wiper motor is. Something was going on with the wiper motor that was obviously had nothing to do with the blades. But he says, it wasn't like that before you put those wiper blades on there. And it turned out it needed a wiper motor because it was just wore out, you know, with 325,000 miles and who knows how many wipes. But anyway, that guy was always like it. Anytime we ever worked on anything, even though the car didn't belong to him, whatever we did was, you know, that same car. It's kind of funny. This old record driver we had that didn't understand a lot about, you know, the newer technology, he'd come back and he'd say, the airbag light? The airbag light comes on. And I says, well, how many times did it flash? He goes, I don't know, it just came on, it flashed a little bit and then it went off. I said, I need to know how many times it flashed so I can get the code. And he says, okay, I'll watch that next time. So when he drove the car again, he came back and he says, it came on and it flashed 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times, which still did me no good whatsoever. I don't understand why he couldn't understand. I needed him to just count the flashes, tell me if it was a 3, a 4, or a 5, or a 6. 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 didn't do me any good. All right, so I drew a ticket on a mid-'80s Ford pickup that barely had the hood open since it was new. Everything needed to be done to that thing to clear up the emission system, and the throttle body was nasty. The idle air control was all clogged up. It was misfiring. These plugs were bad. Had a stopped-up fuel filter. The ignition timing was late, probably because the timing chain was stretched a little bit. Throttle position sensor had a ragged signal, and a whole lot of vacuum leaks. So we created an estimate, received the go-ahead, made repairs, and test drove the truck, which ran very well, but it was kind of an expensive bill. Okay, this guy came back and he said, my truck still ain't fixed. Well, whenever I did some checking on that, what I found out was the lift pump in the gas tank, and back before 1990, Ford had a lift pump in the tank and a pump on the frame. And if that lift pump wasn't consistently feeding that pump on the frame, you would have all kinds of issues. Sometimes you'd have no starts and other kind of things. Anyway, Ford was doing that back in the 80s. They would put a little lift pump in the tank that wasn't, it was kind of like had a little impeller in it, kind of like a windshield washer pump that just moved the fuel to the big pump on the frame. And they finally got smart and did away with that in 1990. But the point is, when I was listening to I put my ear, sometimes I just put my ear against the stethoscope, I could tell the pump in the tank was coming and going. And when the pump in the tank was not pumping, it would cause bubbles and stuff to, the pump would lose its prime on the frame, and it would cause it to run bad. And I told him, I says, I'd already done all this I didn't sell him anything he didn't need, right? All right, so the pump in the tank is what it looks like, feeds the pump on the frame on these older model trucks. That's just the way that thing's set up. And that's would throw a lot of people because they didn't feel like they didn't. A lot of them didn't know there was two pumps. But anyway, I hadn't sold him nothing he didn't need. He had another problem. He'd already paid us a bunch of money, and he had the idea it was our fault because we didn't catch everything. Which, if you got a pump in the tank that's coming and going, you're not going to catch it. If you fixed everything else and it runs good, and you didn't drive it 50 miles, then you may not catch the pump in the tank not working right. And so he says, if you put this pump in this tank, is this going to fix my truck? Well, it's a junky truck that's got lots of miles on it. He didn't maintain it worth a flip. And I says, you won't have any more trouble with your truck. You won't even ever need another oil change. It'll never need to be back in the shop for anything else. It'll be fixed forever. Really? This guy's whining about this. So anyway, I sent him back to talk to the service writer. I don't remember if he let us fix that truck or not, but some people you can't satisfy. Well, his 99 Expedition had a leaking heater core, replaced 2 years ago by another shop for leaking, but now it's leaking again. All right, so we had to pull all this junk off to get to it, and that's what it looked like right there. This was at the college. And the first thing the guy noticed when he pulled the panel and accessed the blend door in the heater core was that the blend door was installed upside down. And he had done these before, and he was sharp enough to catch that. But notice this rust in the bottom of the housing from the leak. This same one also had a blend door actuator that was full of ants. And ants will cause all kinds of problems. I don't know why they like to go to the places where they can cause the most trouble, but a lot of times they do. I've seen ants piled up 1/4 of an inch thick all the way across a battery from one terminal to another, killing the battery. Now, I ain't kidding about that. Okay. All right. Some possible reasons for the leak. We didn't notice how the lines were connected when we took it down because we were pulling it apart, But from the water pump, see that little orifice in there? Now, a lot of them will have a bigger pipe on the outlet than they do on the inlet. This one here had the same size inlet and outlet, but this little orifice in here was basically acting like the small pipe, right? So a cooling system with an off-balance pH, acid or alkaline, can cause it to, go bad on the inside. So anyway, and electrolysis will begin to eat that aluminum away, Have you ever seen those radiator caps that's got a little anode built under them that's supposed to neutralize electrolysis? Ships, aluminum boats have got anodes on the back of them, and those dissolve and keep the aluminum boat from getting eaten up by electrolysis in seawater. I learned that when I was down in Cajun country working. Anyway, the owner of the shop called me to see if he had anybody he could use. This is a sidebar. And so he said every technician he hired for the past 2 years disappointed him. They start out strong, but they get lazy. And they get to work. He was trying to pay these guys a straight time wage. And they were tickled pink with that instead of having to work commission. But they'd start out working real hard, and then they get slow, and then they get where they didn't produce. That's why most shops like to pay mechanics commission. One of the best ways to pay a mechanic, I think, is to give him a guarantee up to a certain level and then pay him whatever he makes over that. And a lot of times that'll be put enough of a carrot out there. It depends on the mechanic's personal work ethic, I have seen guys that were on commission that got put on salary and just quit working. They quit turning any hours. And so some people really crank out a lot of good hours when they're on commission, but won't work when they're on straight salary. Anyway, so I sent this guy, the guy that did the work on this expedition, and he couldn't have been any happier with that fellow. Energy, enthusiasm, work ethic, and that same guy is now working at a dealership making really good money. Now, what I did here, I take a clear hose and loop out the heater core. I'm going to do this when I'm trying to figure out if there's good coolant flow going to the heater core, right? Okay, you'll be surprised how much you can learn by just looping out the heater core with a clear hose like you buy at the hardware store in whatever place and fire it up. Now, I had it out there on the back slab by the steam cleaner and all, and I says, look at all of this. There's a lot of rust and crud going through there, but we had, pretty doggone good flow through there. If you don't have any flow through there, look for a water pump problem. If you got an impeller that's eroded away on the water pump, you won't have good flow through that heater hose. Sometimes, even though the car is not overheating, you may have a water pump that's cavitated or something like that. All right. Okay. So clogged heater core because of this rust is another problem. What I did with this one was I pulled the hose off and let it and kept adding water to the radiator while it was running and letting it just push that rusty water out. There was no antifreeze in it. And let it just push rusty water out while I kept adding water with the engine running until all of that rust was gone. And then we flushed out the heater core by hooking that one hose up to the heater core and letting it come out the other way. And that worked pretty doggone good. All right. Alright, so on this Mazda we pulled a PO135 code, points to an open in the H02S11 circuit, similar to what we had the other day that I was talking about. And the pinpoint tests abound for that kind of concern. It's not rocket science to troubleshoot an O2 heater. This is what I was talking about. Right here, this wire here and that wire there are the one. That wire leads to this oxygen sensor, right? So you keep your old O2 sensor pigtails. See how the two white wires are always a heater? Alright, so you can hook that light to those two white wires on an old oxygen sensor pigtail, plug it into the harness, fire it up, see if that light comes on. Works really well. Alright, on this particular one here, we found out the sensor had good 12 volt power going to it. There's your red white wire right there. So we didn't need to go that way. Alright, the grounds frequently are overlooked, but this ground is the controlled output from the PCM, and it was an open circuit between there and there. Which is, there was an open circuit between here and here. So rather than digging through the harness and splitting all the tape off and opening up the convolute tube, we went ahead and ran another wire and took care of the code, took care of the light, took care of the problem. Question 1. What important steps should be taken before a refrigerant recycler is connected to a vehicle's air conditioning system? This is the one that's going to pull the refrigerant out and store it, right? Pulls it out, filters it, puts it in a tank so you can put it back in when you're done doing your work. So what do you need to do? Got to let the car cool. Supposed to use a refrigerant identifier. Some refrigerant must be checked for flammability using a propane torch, or a leak check must be performed. Question 2. What should be done with refrigerant blends? What should you do with them? They should be what? Recovered, exhausted, recovered with an R12 compatible equipment, or none of the above. Alright. Checking my time here. Okay, question 3. Technician A says pressure switches are typically used to cycle the compressor and or the cooling fan. Technician B says bad pressure switch might prevent the compressor from engaging. Who's right about that? Question 4. A test light's connected between ground and the trigger side of this normally open relay coil. The relay should do what? Look at it carefully. It should close, burn up, open, or none of the above. Think about it. This is power right here, by the way, coming from engine controls. Alright, what's the purpose of this diode? A, it acts as a fuse. B, it shuts down the compressor. C, it prevents an inductive spike. I only got an A, B, and C on that one. So, question 6, the evaporator thermistor, A, prevents excessive high pressure. B, prevents excessive moisture buildup on the condenser. C, signals the controller concerning evap temp to cycle the compressor to prevent evaporator icing. Or D, reads evaporator pressure. Question 7, sending a B plus signal through the wire from amplifier pin 11, you hear the compressor cycle on. What does that mean? That's the AC request signal, right? That's the AC amplifier. You got to pay attention to the schematic, how it's fixed. There's your switch right there, your fan switch. Alright, and this is your little AC switch, the little button you push on the dash. It's got the blue light in it. Okay, the compressor clutch field coil is inoperative. The circuit is complete from the amplifier to the relay. The relay is good, or all of the above. What is it? AC amplifier is a little electronic component that takes inputs and provides outputs for the AC system. Those have been around for a long time on some vehicles. Question 8. Why would the AC switch have a ground wire along with power and switch signal circuits? That's a ground wire right there. What's that ground wire doing there, and why does it need it? A, to prevent high voltage spikes. B, to provide a ground path for the indicator LED in the switch. C, to provide a ground for the signal. Or D, to ground the relay. Question 9. What should this test light do with the AC and the vehicle turned off? So you've got the key off, the AC is off, you've pulled the fuse, you've actually got the B plus right here. B plus test light, and you're touching the side that goes out of the compressor clutch. What should you see there? Should it illuminate, blow the fuse, energize the clutch, or do nothing? Question 10. If the blower motor relay contacts are stuck closed, there's your blower motor relay, which speeds will work? Low, medium, high, or the fan won't work? Give you a second to look at that. All right, let's go look at our answers. Question 1. You need to hook a refrigerant identifier to determine if the system is charged with a blend. All right, you contact Neutronics about this. Get a refrigerant identifier. They're fairly pricey, but you really need one if you don't want to contaminate your machine and spread refrigerant all over the place that's got hydrocarbons and mixed with R12 and all other kind of stuff in there. You know, the refrigerant identifier will tell you if it's got hydrocarbon mix or if it's got air in it or if it's got R12 in it. And I don't know how many times we've hooked up a refrigerant identifier to one that you never would have thought was going to be a problem, but it had been connected to somebody else's machine that got some gas out of somebody else's car and put in this car. It's a big mess. It's a really good idea to find out what it is you've got. All right. That'll be recovered with a separate machine that's dedicated to blended gas. The tank should be painted gray with a yellow top. And the only problem with that is once you get a full tank of that, it's hard to find anybody that wants to take it off your hands, so you're just going to have to store it. Never vent refrigerant to the atmosphere. You're not supposed to do that. It's against the law. It's also a good idea to get an ESCO certification. ESCO certification is very important if you're working on air conditioners, if you don't want a $33,000 fine from the feds if one of them comes in there and asks if you've got ESCO certifications. And just one guy in the shop having it is not enough. The guy that's doing the work's got to have it. Unless it's a school, and then my ESCO certification covered my students, right? Question 3. The technician says pressure switches are typically used to cycle a compressor and or the coolant fan. Both of those guys are right. This thing can keep the compressor from engaging. A test light's connected between ground and the trigger side of this normally open relay coil. The relay ought to go click, it ought to close. Because that test light has got enough of a current carrying capability, and it's actually to this little relay coil, that test light is a wire, and that is going to close it. It's going to provide ground signal. Question 5. What's the purpose of this diode? This diode basically prevents an inductive spike. I worked on a truck one time that had a power takeoff that had an AC style clutch on it, and it kept frying the radio. And whenever I put my scope on it, I found out that there was a 400 volt spike coming out of that coil in that PTO clutch every time they turned off the switch, and it was kicking back into the radio and destroying it. Question 6. The evaporator thermistor keeps the evaporator from icing up by turning off the compressor if the evaporator gets too cold. Question 7. Sending a B+ signal through the wire from amplifier pin 11. You hear the compressor cycle on. That means the compressor clutch is good, the circuit's complete from the amplifier to the relay, and the relay is good. That's a way that you can eliminate a whole bunch of stuff that way. A whole part of your circuit. Question 8. This provides a ground path for the LED and the switch. If you see that little symbol with those two arrows coming off, that is an LED, okay? Alright, what should this test light do with the AC and the vehicle turned off? That should light. If this circuit is good and that compressor clutch is not burned out and that ground is good, that should light that light. That's a way you can tell if you've got a burned out compressor clutch. Really important. Question 10. If the blower motor relay contacts are stuck closed, what speeds will work? When that relay is closed, the only speed you're going to have is high. And it'll be blowing all the time. You see that? If it's stuck shut, like if it's welded shut, you're going to have a fan mower blowing all the time because it's got a ground. See that? This is on a Chevy truck. All right, I hope you got something out of this. I really appreciate the good comments I'm getting back from some people. And I thank you for watching the video. And give me any feedback that you deem appropriate. And I'll see you next time.